Tuolla Lontoossa Jennin mä kohtasin. Halo Vepi, oho. Hän on neidosten joukossa kaunihin. Halo Vepi, oho.
Well, welcome again to another adventure with books on Gloucester Bookies. Writing books, reading books, borrowing books from the library, buying books, shelving books, storing books, giving books away. I am Wayne Soiney, and with me today is Professor Raymond Hildenan. You're all the way from Lanesville.
From Lanesville,
That's
yeah.
it. I wonder if the best thing might be for Raymond to start.
Okay.
And he read more books. He read more books by the time he was 10 than I read in my life. So he's a very astute selector of good books. You go ahead.
Yeah, well, it's funny you say that because Lanesville, Suzanne Natter was going to be with us today. However, her cousin, Selma, was in town recently, all the way from, I believe, Nevada. And I bring that up because we were once in a race for who read the most books in one summer at Lane School. And I did win, and I think the total number of books was 32. And
But Selma came in the first of all the girls.
Yes, she did.
Yes.
But she objected. She said, no one could have read that many books, Raymond. And we were just reminiscing about that recently. Okay, a little anecdote there. And I may come back to schools in the Lane School a little bit later. But today, mostly, I'm going to talk about...
People out there are going to say, where is this Lane School that you're talking about? You're inventing things? Lane School used to be across from the St. Paul Lutheran Church, where there's now a parking lot. That was the Lane School, torn down in probably, 1960 something?
I'm not sure. Let me see. I should know that because my sisters were in the
early
last
60s
class.
Anyway.
Yes.
Yeah.
In the mid-60s.
So don't really go looking for the Lane School. But there
I'm
was
sure
one
no one
time
will.
we were both alumni
Yes.
of the Lane School. Go right ahead.
Anyways, so the first book I'm going to talk about today is Travels with Charlie in Search of America. And I'm not sure why I chose this, but I had been meaning to reread it for a while. I read it when it first came out. And what struck me is that a lot of people, including myself, were under the misconception that John Steinbeck won the Nobel Prize for Travels with Charlie. However, because he was awarded the Nobel Prize 4 months after its publication. However, it really was for his body of work and not for a particular novel. Although others would say it was The Grapes of Wrath, published, 20 years before that, 25 years before this one. So Travels with Charlie is an attempt by John Steinbeck to rediscover his past, and a past in America which he thought he had lost touch with. And some say it was also, he had not had a bestseller in about 10 years. And so others thought that, he just touched upon a good topic. And they were right. Travels with Charlie did become the #1 bestseller in 1961. It was #1 in the New York Times bestseller list. And it was very popular. And also, Travels with Charlie is actually a standard poodle. And he brought the standard poodle along with him. Charlie becomes a leitmotif, if you will, for some of the thoughts that John Steinbeck wishes to put pen to paper about. So I wondered, so his purpose in the preface is he wanted to reconnect with America, but he also, the people of America, but he also wanted to see how America had changed since he was young. He grew up in California, but he was mostly an East Coast person. He was extremely successful. He was also ill. And in a few years, he was to die from cancer, and he already knew that he was not well. And so, in a way, it was also his farewell, I think, a farewell tour, if you will, of America. Before I got into the book, I wondered what were some of the books that possibly had influenced him. It seems that as a travelogue, it's sort of one of a kind, although I began thinking that it reminded me somewhat of de Tocqueville's visit to America in 1836 and his famous poem, Democracy in America. Another book that was very influential, I believe, was The Other America by Michael Harrington, which also was influential in the campaign of President Kennedy in 1960. This tour did take place, his tour of America took place in 1960 and went into the winter of early 61. And he also, The Other America had as its themes, the book by Michael Harrington. It was a study of poverty in America and also about farmers and migrant workers. And those three themes, for those of you who know John Steinbeck's early works, were very, very much an important part of his themes in those books: poverty, migrant workers, farmers.
May I ask then, oddly, in this book, it doesn't strike me that you could get into those themes. Or did he?
He does, absolutely.
He does.
And then finally, one of the books that I thought might give me some clues to where he was going was another famous book, The Making of the President, 1960, by Theodore White. And because John Steinbeck maintains throughout the book that Americans were apathetic to politics and that he was disappointed with that in his travels, that no one was talking about politics. And this crucial election was going on and no one was talking about it. So I decided to delve into that a bit, but I got too sidetracked. I had to come back to Travels with Charlie. Now, to begin with, there are only two other characters in this book. John Steinbeck, the author who travels throughout America and records his impressions, and then his standard poodle, Charlie, and Rocinante. Some of you may recognize who Rocinante is, and of course, that is the name of Don Quixote's famous steed in Miguel de Cervantes' tale. And so immediately I realized, okay, this is not going to be a straightforward narrative of his travels because he already has a truck that he has called Rocinante. And on the back of this truck, he has built a cabin, sort of like today's camper trucks. And he's ahead of himself in this way. And then, as I said, the other character is Charlie, his standard poodle, who is really a leitmotif throughout the novel because he talks to him and tells Charlie what he has observed. And of course, Charlie just sits and listens and nods his head.
Sure.
Now, it's also interesting that in 1960, I believe for the first time, what was then called the French poodle was suddenly the vogue in America. It became the number one most popular all-breed dog in America and remained so for 30 years. So he was ahead of his time because he'd already had Charlie for 10 years. And although he calls him a French poodle, he takes a great deal of pain to maintain with his own sense of machismo that Charlie was not a pampered poodle, not at all. And neither was our author, because before the story even starts, he's supposed to start off on Labor Day, 1960, and he's leaving from Sag Harbor. He's a wealthy author. He's got a very fine home on Sag Harbor, near where Teddy Roosevelt once was.
Up in Maine.
No, I'm sorry, on Long Island. Yes.
Long Island, okay.
And so he's going to start the day after Labor Day, but lo and behold, Hurricane Donna comes roaring up the coast and interrupts his plans. He also has a very large yacht. Well, not too large because he can handle it himself, but it's out in the water. And when the hurricane strikes, he has to rescue it. But the police won't let him near the harbor. So he goes around the harbor, gets a little dinghy, and rows out to his boat in the middle of Hurricane Donna and rescues his sailboat. So I think he tells the story because, after he introduces Charlie as this, what people might think is a French Muppet, if you will, no, I'm a He-Man in the American tradition. And this comes out in the rest of the novel as well.
Okay.
So,
his Hemingway moment in the hurricane.
yes,
Okay.
yes, because that's somebody who I sometimes found myself thinking about in his sense of machismo.
Okay.
So we have Rocinante and the truck, the camper, and Charlie the poodle.
I'm going to interrupt only because I remember reading this book, but just like anything else, much of it is amnesia. I don't remember, except I remember one scene, and that scene dovetails with your comment. That was when, that character, the Incredible Hulk, when you have a moment in which you become a monster. There's a scene in this book where Steinbeck is driving in or near the national park.
Yes.
Was it?
Yellowstone.
Yellowstone. And Charlie's beside him, and there's either the scent of a bear or the sight of a bear, and Charlie goes into his mode of, and Steinbeck couldn't even recognize the dog because it was becoming wolf-like with this in the response to the national park scenery. You'll recall that.
Oh yes,
that's
and
when Charlie showed his masculine self.
Yes, and he was no longer a French poodle, according to John Steinbeck. And there's a little preamble to that, because when he got to Yellowstone, the ranger would not let him in because Charlie was not on a leash, which was the rule. And Steinbeck says, "Well, I'm not going to put him on a leash. He's the gentlest, kindest. He's a French poodle, and he's going to be fine." And the ranger insisted, "No, I'm sorry." Somehow John Steinbeck convinces him, "I will keep the dog in my trailer. I promise you." And so the ranger let him in and let Charlie in. Well, he's not in there very long before 2 beers, and the dog goes crazy. So he goes a little bit further and encounters 3 times he encounters bears and then decides, okay, I can't take this dog. Barking all the time. He was jumping, scratching at the windows. A dog who had never acted like this before. Right. So he has to drive back, and as he drives back, he tells the ranger, "I'm sorry, you were right. I can't take this."
Even Yogi and Boo Boo, that would be woo.
Wow.
Watch out.
Anyway, so to get back to Steinbeck's story, he sets out on this tour of America. And he sets it into 3 parts. First, he goes to New England, which in many ways is his favorite part of America. He loves the early history of New England. He's a believer, even though I believe in the Protestant ethic of some of the early Protestant writers. But he loves the simplicity also of the people of New England, which in 1960 one could still find, especially in Vermont, New Hampshire, and Maine. So my first anecdote about it happens in Maine, where he talks about the importance of knowing where he was going. And he did have a destination in Maine, I mean, other than just going through and observing. but he had an invitation to go to Deer Isle off the coast of Maine through a woman who was also an authoress. So, but on the way, he gets lost. And when he stops for instructions, he doesn't even know where he is. It turns out he is in Bangor, Maine. And when he asks for instructions, they say, "What do you need instructions for?" That was the answer. This true Maine Yankee says, "What do you need instructions for?" He said, "I'm lost." "Well, sir, no one gets lost in Bangor." John Steinbeck says, "Well, that's not very helpful." If we have time, I can read a little bit.
That's a good story. Read it. I think it's characteristic.
And so, although I got lost in Bangor and had to drive 10 miles in the wrong direction, even though I had been given written directions, apparently they weren't any good. I don't think anyone ever got so lost in this country as I got lost in the Maine countryside. And I also got lost in Ellsworth, Maine, which I am told is impossible. Then the roads narrowed. Late in the despairing afternoon, I stopped my truck and approached a majestic state trooper. What a man he was, granite to the core, and a perfect model for some future equestrian statue. I wonder if future heroes will be carved in marble jeeps or patrol cars. He was stationed outside of it. See, I seem to be lost for the third time in less than an hour, he says. I wonder if you could direct me. Where is you want to go? I'm trying to get to Deer Isle. He looked at me closely, and when he was satisfied that I wasn't joking, he swung on his hips and pointed to a small distance away where there was open water, and said nothing more, just pointed. So Steinbeck says, "Is that it? Is that the island?" He nodded from up and down, but left his head down. "Well, how do I get there? I have always heard that Maine people are rather taciturn, but for this candidate for Mount Rushmore, talkative, he was unbearably talkative. He swung his chin in a small arc in the direction I had been traveling. In other words, you got to go back. If the afternoon had not been advancing, I would have tried for another word from him, even if I was doomed to failure. Thank you was all I said, and wondered to myself as though I rattled on forever. So the man never even he just points.
Right.
And being lost becomes a metaphor, I think, because one of the findings in his book that the America he was searching for is lost. Did you have an anecdote about getting lost?
The only one I can tell that's like that, and it's not as well written as this guy's, boy. I was down in Connecticut one time, and we had to stop for directions also to a restaurant, and the middle-aged lady who seemed to be local, we said, "How do we get to this restaurant?" And she looked at us and, didn't sit down the road here. And she said, "Turn left at where the old jail used to be."
Yeah.
Whoa, turn left where the old jail used to be. Very serious. She was absolutely serious. I was thinking, there's not going to be a stone on a stone where the old jail used to be, except you're supposed to know to turn left. Anyway, we did make it to the restaurant.
Oh, good.
But it wasn't.
Well, I have a similar story also. And to back up John Steinbeck, it happened in Maine. And I was headed to my niece, a reception for my niece. And it was taking place in a very small town. To avoid embarrassing the town, I won't mention the name. But I got lost, just like John Steinbeck. And I'm sure the locals were wondering, well, no one gets lost in Maine, sir. But so finally, I stopped at a small country store, and I asked for directions. I was told, "Oh, that's easy." And I had already been 10 miles up the road and 10 miles back. I hadn't found the place. The woman says, "Oh, that's easy. You just go down the road here, and you turn at the old post office. I said, oh, but I hadn't passed any post office, new or old. But I took out again, went 10 miles by, never saw a post office, came back and said, I'm sorry, I can't find it. I couldn't find. So she says to me, well, did you find the new post office? If you went to the new post office, you've gone too far. And I said, no, ma'am, I found no post office at all. So she said, I take it you're not from here. Let me make it simple. Just go down the road a bit and turn on the dirt road. Well, normally that would not have worked, I'm sure. But I remember having passed a dirt road. So I went back, turned on that dirt road, and it worked.
That worked.
When I got to the reception, people were in hysterics over my story because they said, you never ask for instructions in Maine.
No,
So
good rule.
So did you want to take a break and talk about one of your books?
No, you go ahead with further.
So he's left New England, then he goes to the Midwest.
Yes.
And in the Midwest, I would say that's the part of the country that he's most disappointed in. He talks about the burgeoning cities of Toledo and Columbus and then on into Michigan and Detroit and all the factory cities of Ohio and Illinois and Michigan. And he's despondent. And he thinks that America has lost its soul to the industry. You know, like it's more important for us to make business than it is to take care of our people. So I don't really have any anecdotes, although it's very well written. This section is very well written. John Steinbeck is a stylist, but a simple one, and a little bit perhaps like Mark Twain.
Reader friendly.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. And so he then he has a stop in Chicago, and to meet his wife, who on the journey comes to meet him about 4 times. Some people think it was a bit more because he was gone for so long that he was probably getting tired. He wasn't well, but she met it. And they stayed in an exclusive, I believe it was the Ambassador Hotel in Chicago, a very expensive hotel. But Charlie, his standard poodle, is a mess, is an absolute mess. So he sends him to the to the groomer and pays quite a bit in those days, $10 to have his dog groomed. And then John Steinbeck feels he can come into this first-class hotel. And sure enough, Charlie comes prancing out with a pom-poms on his ears, a big pom-pom on his head, pom-poms on his tail, pom-poms on his ankles, and struts across. And so it's one of the few times where Charlie is not, let us say, the machismo dog that John Steinbeck would like his readers to think he is.
He's showing off.
But he's being honest about
Sure.
it. Honesty is one of the things that comes through. So he's very disappointed with the cities of the Midwest and Ohio and Michigan and the highways that he has to drive. In New England, he loves New England because there are still all these old country roads that really get you somewhere. But in the Midwest, you're on Route 10, I believe, is one of the big ones that he hates. It's just highway after highway after highway. And he says, but they're cluttered with traffic. So the little scenery that's here, I can't see because I've got to keep my eyes on the road or people are going to beep at me. Yeah. And they do. Yeah. But then later on, he enters Wisconsin. Now, one of the things both about Wisconsin and New England, and I've mentioned this, is that he's astonished that nobody is talking politics. This is a crucial, as Theodore White says, this is one of the crucial elections in American history.
The primary up in Wisconsin,
and there was a primary in Wisconsin, and so I turned to Theodore White to see, okay, what does he think about Wisconsin? Unfortunately, it was fascinating, but he doesn't tell us much about sightseeing in Wisconsin. Obviously, that's the purpose of his book. But he also doesn't tell us too much. But what he does tell us about why, particularly the Democrats, but also the independent voters, turn out for Kennedy. And it has to do with some of the themes that John Steinbeck is interested in. It turns out that some reviews of this book pointed out that Kennedy was actually friends with Steinbeck, and they had a similar progressive philosophy.
Anecdote about Jackie Kennedy campaigning for her husband. She was out on the campaign trail. Typically, you remember he ran for Senate first. So her experience was speaking in or around Boston and in Massachusetts for her husband rather than in Wisconsin. So she's in Wisconsin, dropped in there by the campaign staff, and she makes a little speech to the crowd. And what had always been a crowd pleaser here in the East, she tries in Wisconsin, and she says in her wonderful voice, does everybody here know Southie, my hometown? You know that song.
Yep.
It closes all the bars in South Boston, and all the Democrats know how to sing it in all the lines. But of course, in Wisconsin, who even knows what she's talking about? That's an anecdote.
Well, actually, that's not true. That was successful in Milwaukee, the home of the famous home of Beer Tappers. They knew the song, and that came out.
They knew Southie by hometown. And this
yes,
is,
yes.
I'm glad it's in that book.
But it's interesting too. You bring up Mrs. Kennedy, and one of the things in the book was really interesting. I found, because this was before Jackie became a fashion icon and became famous in America as a woman of great style and taste. There's a wonderful description of the Kennedy family waiting for the returns in Hyannis Sport. But before the news people get there, Jackie realizes they're coming, and she thinks the house is it's a typical Hyannis Sport, a vacation spot, and the house is ready for touch football and swimming, but not quite ready yet for Jackie Kennedy. But she decides to redo the downstairs area so that the newscasters and the journalists will feel more at home. Well, she was there for a while doing this, and then Jack comes in and says, "Who's done this? Put it back, put it back." So her first attempt at redecorating fails. However, it was probably the last time that President Kennedy disagreed with his wife on matters of style.
Oh, no doubt.
And that is in the beginning of Making of the President. I wanted to talk about this because...
Who was there that night from Gloucester? You know who.
Ben Smith.
Ben Smith was there from Gloucester. Big campaigner for Kennedy in 1960.
Well, I did want to finish
Go ahead.
I thought it was very prescient of Theodore White. This is an excellent book, well deserving of the Pulitzer Prize. But to tell this story shows how much he knew about Kennedy and his wife before the rest of the country did. That he would point out, that he was sharp enough to point out that she had redecorated this, but Kennedy was still interested in the local touch, and he wanted that room put back. And that he points this out. That book is marvelous. It just, anyone who wants to find out more about the election of 1960, this is where you start. And in my idea, you can finish. It won the Pulitzer Prize, of course.
Wrap it up so I can talk about
Absolutely.
Pluto.
How much time do we have?
You have 2 minutes.
Okay.
Go ahead.
So I'll just... When he gets to the west, as he goes to the west, Montana is beautiful, and the reason it's so beautiful, it's like New England is still in its sort of even more than New England. It's in its pristine state. He finds Montana beautiful. He loves it, and from Montana he goes to Yellowstone, where he has the famous scene. And then he goes on to the Pacific coast, and again, and when he reaches Seattle, he is so disappointed because he grew up near Seattle, and as he not grew up, but in his 20s he was in Seattle, and he doesn't recognize it. He does not recognize Seattle, and he's despondent. Then he goes to California, and Salinas, where he actually did grow up, it's grown 4 times. When he lived there, the population was 20,000, smaller than Gloucester. and now it's 200,000, and he's despondent. And so a sense of melancholy pervades the rest of the book. And but the writing, you've got to read this book just for the writing. His descriptions of California are beautiful. The last part of, I have two more things I do want to get in, he drives through Arizona and New Mexico and says nothing about them. And I'm saying, that's beautiful country. Why isn't he talking about them? Well, at night, he lets his dog out to go to the bathroom, and the dog escapes. He has to go find him. And the dog has climbed a mountain and is looking down on a ravine in a canyon. Oh. And it's beautiful. A blue ravine with the midnight sky and the stars. And John Steinbeck waxed poetic and thanks his dog for letting me see the beauty of Arizona and New Mexico on the day that I'm leaving. Okay, so the one other thing is he's heading back to New York.
Life is full.
If you interrupt me, I'm not going to finish in my 2 minutes. That's part of your time, sir.
Life is full of moments that redeem it, and there is one. Go ahead.
Okay, so when he gets back, he's driving through Virginia, and then he's headed on the last highway home to Long Island. And he gets lost. He said, this is where I live. How can I get lost? So I took that as meaning, not only is he lost, America is lost. And so to wind up, I did want to talk about for the readers who want more sense of this book. His four themes, I would say, are how population growth has, particularly in the Midwest and Pacific coast, has destroyed the heart of America. He's upset with the racial tensions. There's a wonderful scene in New Orleans that you can read about with white mothers protesting against integration. He's upset with technology and industrial change. And finally, environmental destruction. And I found this interesting because environmental destruction, Silent Spring, published at the same time, and Silent Spring knocks his book off the number 1 post in the New York Times. So I shall end with that little anecdote. Well, so what do you have to tell us?
I will, but you're cluing people in. This is a relevant book to the time. He was writing ahead of his time and foreseeing essentially the future issues that we will face, that we are facing. Wonderful book, Travels with Charlie by Charles Steinbeck.
And then if we have time, I'll tell you. I wanted to go back and talk about what was Gloucester like in 1960. So I took a look at the 1960 yearbook. But that can wait for another time. However, I do want to tell people, because the election was so important in 1960, Gloucester High School voted for Nixon over Kennedy.
By 2 votes, probably.
No, anyway, by a fair amount.
By a landslide. Anyway, you may know this. Sawyer Free Library, and I'd love to quote when I can that something. Sawyer Free Library has a way on computer that you can link in to those yearbooks. And I think they have every one, including 1960, that you can look back and flip the pages and see what our city, what America looked like.
Well, again, you've stolen from my time because that was one of the comments I was going to make.
Yes.
So you stick to your topic and I'll stick to mine. So what do you have to tell us today?
Pluto. I say the best of Sawyer Free Library is for the kids and the grandkids, if you have, whichever way that you want to bring a book to their attention, kids' attention. This year's book, 2023, is written by Miss McNulty and illustrated by Stevie Lewis. By the way, Stevie Lewis is an illustrator who already illustrated the sun, the moon, and Mars. And now she got to Pluto. This is a beautiful little sketch of on the cover of Pluto. And Stevie
looks like you.
Yeah, very much without hair. Stevie Lewis, and it says Pluto. The title Pluto, not a planet, not a problem, because some of us would remember that there was a planet called Pluto. Mm-hmm. 9 planets was a big thing. 9 planets. Now there's only
been demoted.
8. 2006, they demoted Pluto from a planet to, I don't know what it is now, something else that orbits, not a planet. But the Pluto book for kids introduces this planet as a character that you can relate to, and very witty little person. Nice to meet you. My name is Pluto. I'm proud, playful, and popular. Non-planet. This is the same.
Oh, and he knows he's not a planet anymore?
He knows now that he's not a planet. And there's a lot that you can learn about in an entertaining way. Do you know the ordinary temperature on Pluto?
Minus 604.
Minus 378 degrees. Yeah, that's pretty cold. I guess if you took inches, the Earth is 1 inch from the sun. Pluto is 40 inches from the sun, more than a yardstick further. So it doesn't raise up its hands and bask in the sunshine like we do in Good Harbor Beach. So this stuff is all in here, and they talk about the trouble is Pluto, it was named after a cartoon character. I don't think anybody ever took it too seriously. And the thing is, but it's a nice little story and character to introduce your.
Would you call that a graphic novel, or more, or is it a children's novel, or?
Yeah. It's for kids. It's not it's not very graphic, so you wouldn't have to warn them that something's,
It's interesting that, apropos the demotion of Pluto, that it caused dismay in many places, but particularly Great Britain, and there was an act in Parliament to overturn it.
Oh, there was a Pluto scale demonstration of 5 protesters out in front of the Parliament, but it didn't work.
And
anyway, let me.
I was going to tell our viewers that one of the reasons it was demoted was that Pluto was unable to clear debris in its orbit. And that was one of the signs of a planet, that a planet could sweep the skies behind it and in front of orbiting debris.
Small as we think it is. Do you know it has moons?
It has 2 moons.
It has 5 moons.
5.
They've discovered 5. And they think that there's not just 5. They think there's more than 5 little moons going around this little thing that's smaller than our moon.
Oh, yeah.
Pluto is smaller than our moon. Anyway.
What else do you have for us there?
Geez, this is one, when you go to the library, when you go to Sawyer Free, don't forget to ask a librarian where you can get this, or if you see it, there's an actual display where you can pick it up free, called Book Page. And Book Page is not just a page, it's reviews, multi-pages. And you can find out about the latest and sometimes the greatest, in other words, past events in writing the books from before. This one is called, this recommended here, in the most recent one, which I just got at the library, My Roommate is a Vampire. It's a debut novel. This breezy contemporary romance introduces the reader to Cassie Greenberg, a 32-year-old artist who's just desperate enough to respond to a Craigslist ad for a roommate. She's amazingly cheap, good quarters with a roommate who turns out to be a vampire. But he's such personable and nice. This is why my roommate is a vampire. And she kind of wonders whether she should try to make that decision to let the character bite her, or it may turn her into a vampire or not. And it's altogether well reviewed as a lighter look at love with the undead, which I think that's like a date with me.
Well, anyway. Don't get me started on that topic.
Anyway,
that's what suddenly is selling: love stories and with vampires and ghosts and haunted houses.
I found another one here, which is comic fiction, and it's called The English Experience, and it's actually the final installment, of a trilogy. But it can be read alone. It's standalone. It's okay. If somebody's in a position, divorced man, weighed down by troubles as people are when they get older, and soon he is corralled into taking the 11, I think, undergraduates or graduate students on a tour of France. So his English experience is, I'm sorry, he goes to England for the experience in London, Oxford, and Bath. You can probably imagine the kind of things he feels lost there, right? He's not. The topics range from the various topics that are made fun of and teased about, fun things. The reviewer thinks that some running gags go on too long, but fans of the first two books will find much to like here. And
have you read the first two books?
I have neither read the first two nor this one, but I love the fact that it clues you in on where to go. It's like a tour guide where somebody clears the way for you.
So is there any real good...
those hotels, they make the bed ready for you, turn the sheets down, and under the pillow is a mint and stuff like that. Chocolate mint. So
is there any kind of solid fiction, traditional fiction books that you can recommend from these pages of this little magazine?
Exactly. I'm turning to the last page now. Cinderella and a Mouse Called Fred. Uh-huh. That's what I would recommend from the world of fiction. By the way, all these books are in Sawyer Free, or this last one is on order.
I was going to say they might not
Sometimes
be.
Sometimes it's too soon. Cinderella and a Mouse Called Fred is a prize winner, and it really is. Well, look at what it says here. The illustrator combines bustling faux bleed spreads with an eye-catching palette marked by various shades of pink, and naturally the deep orange of pumpkins. Remember, pumpkins play a role in this story. And the masterfully composed spread in which Fred transforms into a horse. The mouse turns into a horse, Rocinante, and takes Cinderella off. The fairy godmother is a hoot. Fred is charming, and Ella possesses a refreshing amount of spunk. The text is funny, and it quotes one line here.
Yes.
Seriously, says Ella, glass high heels. Is it? You don't laugh, but
no.
It wasn't a highlight of your day here.
No.
Okay, but then lastly, I don't want to neglect woman you surely have heard of, an author named Jill Lepore. Jill Lepore is not a fiction writer, but she's written nonfiction.
And what are they?
And this recent one is about is a collection of her short essays. In other words, her previous books about Wonder Woman and stuff like that have been full-length books on one topic. This one is the collection of the essays that she's published in New Yorker and other places. Jill Lepore. By the way, she went to, I think, on an athletic scholarship, or else she went to West Point. Some kind of thing that you'd say her career was not going to be a writer at all. But she ended up writing and finding it was fascinating, making a good living at it. I've heard her speak personally, so she is also a good speaker on what she writes. Jill Lepore. There's all kinds of information about the books, the stories, the articles that she's written on deadline, because the title is called The Deadline. You know, what you have to do. Anyway, I just encourage you to, once again, next time you're at the Sawyer Library or any library nearby, I think they all have book page, and it's free, and it gives you an idea of other books that you can read.
Well, I'm getting curious about this book.
Well, this one here I'm going to donate it to the Sawyer Library. In fact, if you don't mind, when we leave here today, we'll go down to the Sawyer Library. They know it's coming. This is the 1899 published logbook of the USS Gloucester. And the USS Gloucester was named after our city in the War of 1898. It was a yacht remodeled into a large yacht, 241 feet yacht, and it was remodeled with armor and guns into a gunboat. The USS Gloucester had a crew of over 60 and one man from Gloucester, from Gloucester, Massachusetts, who shoveled coal into the boiler room. This book, having come out in 1899, at one time was available and bought by a lot of libraries in the New England area, especially including Gloucester. Somewhere through the years, the Sawyer Free Library copy either fell apart or was taken away and never returned. Somebody did. So I'm going to donate this copy of the logbook from 1899. It's never been republished. This is the one and only edition, so you've got to get it in a used form. And I expect that I understand the library is going to receive it, accept it, and accept my offer also to rebind it.
Oh,
because
good.
I want people to be able to pick it up and use it and read it.
And some
without
of our
worrying that the
audience
pages
may
are
know-
going to fall apart or they're doing something to damage the. So it'll be rebound by the time you see it.
And some
in a
of our
couple months.
readers, our audience may know that Wayne did give a little talk at the Story Free Library on that topic in general.
I
And
did.
elsewhere as well, right? Where else have you spoken?
Well, actually, on YouTube, the 1623
That's right.
has a War of 1898 discussion with myself and Laura Ventimiglia for Gloucester 400.
So please watch for that on the 1623 schedule.
Schedule or the YouTube. Anyway, this is a war book as well, and a story I never heard of. The calendar matters, so let me tell you. May 3rd, Dwight Eisenhower said, "Stop firing, no offensive operations. Effectively, the war is over. Those guys are going to sign a surrender momentarily." May 3rd. So that there was supposedly no battles going on. And then you find May 7th, there was a surrender signed. So between May 3rd, 1945,
There was a battle.
and May 8th, May 7th, 1945, there really was a battle. And there's a fellow who researched it and found out about it, and he called it, of course, The Last Battle. And it's intriguing, amazing, surprising, almost every page.
What was Eisenhower's reaction to that when he found out about the battle?
Well, there's nothing in here to tell us what his reaction was, because it was understandable, and it wasn't. As soon as you hear the story, you'll say, I wouldn't criticize that. In the war, it requires a little backstory. In the war, when France surrendered in 1940, the top politicians in France were arrested and taken away by the Germans. And eventually they were all held in one, I'll call it prison, but it was a high-class place, the Castle Itar in Austria. They were given, privileges and fed well, and they weren't mistreated, they weren't interrogated, because Hitler wanted them as cards in his hand if the war was going badly or they had to negotiate a peace.
Yes, one of them was the Queen's cousin, the Duke of Gloucester, I believe.
Well,
wasn't he?
that's one of the British prisoners.
Yeah.
These people happen to be all the French prisoners that I'm talking about that were in this castle in Austria. Now, they were held there for the war for the purposes of being bargaining chips. They included former Prime Minister Clemenceau from World War I fame, and others who were General Weygand, people who were involved in the defense of France in 1940. They were prisoners, even though they shouldn't have been. They weren't prisoners of war. They should have been free
Yes.
as birds, but they were taken by the Third Reich to be bargaining chips. So they're there, 1940, 41, 42, 43, until 1945, May of 45. Now the question is, as soon as you hear it, you'll understand the dynamics in play. What's going to happen to these prisoners once Germany's ready to surrender and they're not useful anymore? And the SS has orders that they should take out the prisoners, kill the prisoners. So so now the very upstanding, amazingly brave commander of the castle, if you will, the troops in there, who knows that the SS is going to arrive in force to kill these innocent prisoners, refuses. He's insistent he's going to defend the castle against the SS. So it's the Germans, little detachment that's already there defending the castle, against other Germans, the SS, who are coming, and the commander of the castle sends word to the American past the American lines. This is more permeable now that it's after May 3rd. It's May 4th, 5th. This battle was May 4th or 5th. He says, more or less, these prisoners from France are in danger. Will you help me rescue them? So this tank battalion and some others in infantry, American forces, are ready to do that. So you can see where Eisenhower wouldn't have any possible objection to rescuing French prisoners. So the battle takes place in which the Germans link up with the Americans to fight against other Germans, the SS, and they successfully protect the Frenchmen, who all survive. Not one is harmed. There's some Germans who die, but there's no French prisoners who perish. Although they had been, intended, it had been intended in the card by the SS to do that. The last battle was written by Stephen Harding, and because his background is in journalism, it's very readable. It's page turner. It's quite a story.
And that's at the library also?
This is at the library. I got it from the library. I just should quote from this in back. There's what do you call those, blurbs from other authors? Yes. And there's a nice one here that says, I love untold stories from World War II, and this is a great one, brilliantly told, meticulously researched, and filled with larger-than-life heroes and villains.
And when was it published?
This goes back a ways.
Yeah.
Let's say, I'll tell you the date momentarily here. It's 2013.
Oh, I thought it was older than that.
About 10 years old.
Yeah.
But I do believe that this has been taken out by lots of people as a
looks well used.
Popular one among the ones who read about World War II, because it is a unique book that way. Well, before we go, I want to forget the last battle. I want to know the last time you saw Elizabeth Taylor. This is a guy who Elizabeth Taylor spoke with, and he got close enough to count the diamonds on her necklace that Burton gave her. What's his name?
Richard Burton.
Richard Burton. You were there. Tell us. You got
but it has nothing to do with books.
You've got 4 minutes before you.
Excepting there is a book which perhaps I can bring in. It's not related to Gloucester, but there's a famous book, The Jewels of Elizabeth Taylor. And the stories in that book are phenomenal, and including the largest diamond that Elizabeth Taylor owned, which was the Krupp diamond. And supposedly Princess Margaret, who knew a thing or two about jewels, having inherited some from her grandmother, Queen Mary, but also often borrowed from Elizabeth.
You only have 3 minutes. You'll never get into it if you go
Well,
through
we
Jules.
can save that for another time.
No, you can't.
Because
I'm going to start it, and then
no,
you can
you're,
finish.
no. It has nothing to do with books. All right, maybe it does because it involves the play.
The Little
The
Foxes.
Little Foxes.
Elizabeth Taylor was nominated, and did she win
Well,
the Tony Award?
Let me tell. How much time do we have?
3 minutes.
3 minutes. Good heavens.
Go.
Well, I was lucky enough to have been invited to an after-cast party of the Little Foxes
In New York,
in New York, yes.
Broadway.
And it was down on. I've forgotten now where it was, down on
Wherever
the
Little
Village.
Foxes was playing.
And, no. The party
the
was
party
on,
was somewhere else.
Yeah,
No,
down there. So anyways,
let me shorten it so you can start with your
it's
part.
not your story. It's mine.
The cast guy, the one that invited you to the cast party, said how to see or meet, where to meet Elizabeth Taylor, which wasn't at the party, it wasn't at the proscenium, wasn't at that different. There was way in back door, backstage door. And you're there waiting to see Elizabeth Taylor. Go.
So, standing next to me is a gentleman from Rome whose English was very good. And his assignment, he was on an assignment from the Italian version of Paris Match. And he's vying for a prize of $10,000 to get it published, to get a picture of Elizabeth Taylor, which no one else had.
If he gets the best picture, he gets $10,000 in what, 1980?
The early 80s.
A lot
yes.
of money.
And so I told him, well, you're not going to get a picture of her here. Number one, pictures of her leaving the theater are a dime a dozen in America. However,
he says, follow me.
if you really want to get a good picture, she's going to leave the back exit of the on a little alley between like 42nd and 41st Street. And sure enough, this is going to happen because I have the inside scoop.
And he complains to you. He doesn't know how he's going to do. You say the fire escape.
Get
up there in the fire escape. He says, "I can't get up the fire escape." You took him on your shoulders and boosted him up onto the fire escape, and now he's up there. He's waiting. He's got his big camera, and you see. Go ahead.
Elizabeth comes walking out, and he bends over the fire escape, snaps his picture. It's a wonderful picture of Elizabeth Taylor with her 18-carat diamond necklace,
and more than that,
haircut, and the famous Taylor bosom seen from above. And he wins the $10,000 prize. It's on the front page of.
And you win. You won.
Nothing.
You won nothing. She talked with you.
Yes, because only for a moment. She said, "Hello there," because this member of the cast, whose name I've now forgotten, he was a minor player, had said, "We have a friend who was dying to meet you. He's going to be outside when you leave." And so she says, "Hello there," but that's all. But I was close enough to her to count the number of diamonds on her necklace, and there were 18 of them.
Thank you very much. She said hello to him. I'm going to say goodbye to you. Next time, we'll get into other stories and books on Gloucester Bookies. Thank you.
Tuolla Lontoossa Jennin mä kohtasin. Halo Vepi, oho. Hän on neitosten joukossa kaunihin. Halo Vepi, oho. Suukon kirsikka silmät niin mustat kuin yö. Ja ne loisti kuin tuikkiva